Hello everyone, welcome to General Psychology, Psychology 101, and today we're going to briefly talk about social interactions. So let's start off talking about antisocial reactions. Especially, let's talk about intergroup interactions. So there are different ways we can think about intergroup relationships. We can think about the cognitive, affective, and behavioral components of these relationships, and these represent stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination respectively. And stereotyping is a really interesting concept to talk about. Stereotypes exist about pretty much all groups that you can think of. We have stereotypes about all these groups for several reasons. Sometimes we acquire stereotypes through others. We may acquire them through our parents or peers or through the media. Sometimes we have stereotypes because we're motivated to justify the status quo. If social inequality exists, we may stereotype those groups that are receiving more of the resources or less of the resources. We might try to legitimize the fact that there are differences between these groups through stereotypes. Well, they're poor, but at least they're happy. They live a fuller life. Sometimes we have stereotypes because we have a conflict with a different group. We may have some kind of competition going on, so we stereotype these other groups in order to justify why we have this conflict happening. Sometimes we have stereotypes because we want to split the world into an us versus them mentality. We might have stereotypes that make our group look better and other groups look worse to make ourselves feel better about our own social categories that we fit into. And stereotypes are by themselves relatively harmless. It's when they transition into prejudice and into discrimination in which they become worrisome and troublesome. So stereotypes are just simply beliefs or ideals about another group. Prejudice is when we actually start to evaluate people based on these stereotypes. So we might have a negative evaluation of teachers because we have many stereotypes about them in negative ways. We can have two different types of prejudice, just like we have two different types of attitudes. Again, both are evaluations. We can have explicit prejudice towards another group, and we can have implicit prejudice towards another group. And generally, we see that implicit prejudice is a better predictor of intergroup relations than explicit prejudice. Explicit prejudice, for the most part, is not accepted in today's society. So implicit prejudice is the type of prejudice that exists for the most part. And implicit prejudice is extremely important because with implicit prejudice, these are based on associations, and this is the type of prejudice that's going to come to the forefront when we need to react quickly, when we need to make a life or death decision, for example, as a police officer, whether or not to shoot someone who we think is committing a crime or is about to shoot at me. So when we talk about discrimination, we're talking about treating other individuals differently solely based on their group membership. This can be blatant or it can be more subtle, and more subtle forms of discrimination are more common in today's society than more blatant forms. So what are some of the ways in which people can discriminate against others? Well, aggression is one of these ways. So aggression obviously is not limited to interactions with members of other groups, but it's important to understand aggression, especially within that type of context. So what is aggression? Well, aggression is an intentional behavior in which a person tries to cause some kind of harm or pain to another one. This can escalate into violence in which someone is trying to cause extreme harm, injury, or even death to another person. Aggression can have many goals. The harm that we cause another person could be instrumental or strategic. It could be more of a means to an end. Or it can be more hostile, where the intention is to actually inflict pain upon another person. Aggression can come in many forms. It can be more physical in terms of actually pushing someone around or punching someone, fighting someone. Or it can be more relational or more psychological, trying to ostracize someone, trying to make sure that someone doesn't have any friends anymore, trying to make enemies of another person. Aggression can be driven by social roles. Men are or have been historically linked to aggression more so than women. Yes, this can be driven by biological factors such as increased testosterone in men, but it can also be caused by cultural or situational factors. There are some especially important factors that can lead to aggression. One of those is frustration. We tend to see aggression occur more often when goals have been thwarted, when people can't do what they want to do on a regular basis, and people become frustrated, and therefore people then end up aggressing towards other people as a result. Another interesting concept with aggression is that the media or the environment, situations, behaviors that people are exposed to can influence the likelihood of a person performing aggressively, behaving aggressively. So we've learned through, when we're talking about learning and memory, that children, especially through social learning, learn by observing other people. And we see that children who are exposed to aggressive behaviors, maybe watch aggressive or violent TV shows, play aggressive or violent video games, tend to exhibit more aggressive and violent behaviors as a result. So let's shift from antisocial relations to prosocial relations. So let's focus first on attraction. How are we attracted to other people? When are we attracted to other people? Well, attraction can be driven by multiple different situational factors, such as how similar we are to someone, how close we are, how familiar we feel to them, etc. But it can also be driven by biological factors. We tend to, as a society, as a culture, identify the same people as being attractive. So there has to be some kind of biological marker or biological factor that decides whether or not a person is attractive. We tend to see that individuals who have faces that are average tend to be perceived as more attractive, and faces that are more symmetrical tend to be perceived as more attractive. So there are some biological factors there. There are some other biological factors that are associated with attractiveness, and these tend to differ between men and women. So that kind of outlines how we're attracted to other people, but why might we be attracted to others? Well, if we take an evolutionary approach, we can see that men might have certain goals in a relationship that differ from the goals that women have. So, for example, men might be looking to reproduce as much as possible, looking for a mate who is attractive, has a good chance of passing down genes, whereas women might be focused on a man who is willing to commit to helping raise a child, who can provide for their offspring. These tend to coincide with for the most part, types of mates that both men and women choose in today's society as well. So what about once an individual is in a relationship? Well, we tend to see that relationship satisfaction is the best predictor of just overall happiness of an individual. We start to see feelings of love emerge, and these can have different characteristics. People can feel intimate toward another person, people can feel passionate, or people can feel committed to another person. And each of these different characteristics can combine to identify a different type of love that a person can feel for another. Generally, what we see is that passionate love tends to be extremely important for starting a relationship. We need the passion to be there. Whereas for longer lasting relationships, we tend to see that those individuals tend to have stronger feelings of commitment and intimacy than passion. So starting out a relationship, passion is important, but commitment and intimacy is important for keeping that relationship going as long as possible. So how do we interact with people who we don't want to start a relationship with, who maybe we're not attracted to, but we still want to interact with them in a positive way? Well, these would be examples of prosocial behaviors. And these types of behaviors are when we benefit other people with how we behave or how we perform, sometimes to the detriment of ourselves. So the norm of reciprocity can be important for helping others. People sometimes have selfish motives to help other people. Empathy can be an extremely powerful motivator for helping. If we feel someone else's pain, if we feel the negative emotions that another individual is experiencing, we might be more likely to help them out. But sometimes we don't always help people out. Sometimes we, as humans, are in situations where we know someone needs help, but we decide not to help them. Why might this happen? Well, we tend to see this happen when many other people are in a situation. This is what's known as the bystander effect. There have been many cases where an individual is in a public place shouting, wanting help, but they don't get any help because there's a lot of other people in the area. Everyone else thinks that someone else is going to do something about it. So they, in turn, decide, I'll only get in the way maybe if I do something, so I'm just going to stand back. Well, this is a problem. This is an unfortunate problem that's been studied quite a bit. So what are some of the steps that we can take to make sure that this doesn't happen? Well, first we have to notice an event, so being aware of possible situations where someone needs help is important. Then we need to define something as an emergency, and this can be something that you, as an individual in the area, can do verbally, can out loud, be like, hey, this person needs help, let's do something. After defining it as an emergency, someone needs to step up and take responsibility for actually doing something. Again, that can be you. You can say, all right, I'll call 911, you go help the person out, you go look for help somewhere. After that step, you need to be able to assess whether or not people can actually help. Ideally trying to figure out who is the best person to identify to perform all these different jobs. And then after that, you want to follow through. You actually want to implement this help. So bystander effect is extremely common, unfortunately, and it's very easy to do something about this. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from these talks about social responsibility and social interactions, is that if someone needs help, you need to be the person to stand up and do something about it. Don't think that someone else is going to do something or someone has already done something. Be the person to stand up, take responsibility, and help out. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for your time and attention, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.